Send me appointments there. I'll wake up and tailgate, and then I'll go sell solar, make $1,000, $2,000 in a day, and then go back and sleep at my friend's house as a 20-year-old and drive. I loved my life, it was a blast. And I was making great money. But once I saw what was going on, the money can only be so good.
Welcome to Sunny Side Up Podcast. What's going on, buddy? How's it going, Demas?
How's it going, man? It's going good. How are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. So tell me a little about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Demas. I'm 25. I'm from Michigan. I grew up in Downriver area of Michigan, if you know where that's at, just south of Detroit. I've been an entrepreneur in one form or another, not always a successful one, but from probably the age of 14-ish, I'd say 14, 15 up, just trying different things, shiny object syndrome and whatnot. And the past few years I've spent mainly in the home improvement industry. And that's kind of where I plan on being for the next few years. So roofing, siding, flooring, windows, whatever you might need, painting. And before that, I was in solar for a good chunk of that time, about 5 years in solar. So my specialties, I'd say the area I, hang out the most in is sales and marketing. It's probably where I've spent majority of my time, but I have a little bit of knowledge in other areas of the industry as well.
Okay. So we talked a little bit before we started going, but how did you get into business and entrepreneurship and all that kind of stuff?
So I've always wanted to do it. It was kind of a connection I made. So number one, my mom is an entrepreneur as well. And my dad is, I would kind of say an entrepreneur as well. More like hustlers, not like an entrepreneur. They were just hustling before. And my mom now has a hair salon and a coffee shop. But they, both came up with not much. Let's just say that, especially my mom. So I knew from an early age on what it was, but I knew when I wanted to get into it was it was kind of more fueled by all the things I wanted to do in life rather than money or success. It was if I want to do all of these things and travel to all these places. And at the time I wanted to own a bunch of different crazy animals. And I was in order to do all of that, the only people in the world who get to do all of that are people with a lot of money. And then that kind of just, led me backwards. I reverse engineered it. Most of those people probably own businesses in a way or another. And I think that's really all. That's what fueled it was just owning my own thing and getting to do all the crazy things I would eventually one day want to do.
Mm-hmm.
My path.
It's good that you had a goal of, okay, I want to get this crazy animal. I want to do this and that. And then you just thought, okay, what do I need to do to get to that point? Right. Because some people, they just kind of start off with an aimless mission, but if there's no goal, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, then you're probably not going to get to where you want to go,
Yeah. And they've changed drastically since then. The goal can always change. Over 10 years, I'm sure I'm not going to have the same goal as this 14-year-old, So they definitely change it. But still very similar concept, I guess you could say. Just optionality, freedom, optionality.
So you mentioned that you were in solar first, and then you got into the home improvement.
Yep.
So what made you walk away from the solar and then because that's a pretty different industry.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a few big transitions. So before the solar, my first real business, I would say, was an inflatable water park company, which I know we've touched on a little bit before. Mm-hmm. Way different from both of these industries. So that's where it started. I started that with some friends of mine. I was 18 at the time, moved to Texas for it. To make a long story short, just in the beginning, moved across the country for it, ran that business for 2 years and was halfway in solar throughout that period. I joined solar in between that business because it was seasonal. Did solar for a few years. And then I was okay, solar, the reason why I switched is I was what was called a dealer. I was a solar dealership. So like Ford, they're not actually Ford. It'll have the person's last name and then it'll say Ford. And how it works is there's sales and there's install in solar. And I was on the sales end. And the reason why I left is every single time we'd go out and sell all this business, whatever it would be, you go sell $1 million in solar and then you give it to an installer. I'm a third party. I'm a subcontractor, salesperson, basically. It's all completely out of my court. I had no control over the cash flow or the project. So I made the switch to home improvement because I had done that multiple times in my life now where I had a solar sales team that was actually doing good, generating a good amount of revenue. And then I would either lose it all or just drastically lose a lot of money that I expected because of the installation process. So I switched to home improvement mainly for more of a control. And I was already doing a little bit of roofing while I was in solar, and I had sold roofs in between that with solar. So it was just kind of an easy transition, because if somebody wanted solar and they need a new roof, we would do that. And then I worked for a roofing company for a few months in between there. So I had a little bit of experience.
I see. Okay. So that kind of answered one of my questions of what made you change from solar into home improvement. Of, you kind of worked with roofing and whatnot. So when you started to transition into roofing, did you have help from a mentor? Like, how did you get into that?
Yeah, so in a way, yeah, because I had a friend who I was helping them in the solar industry, and that's actually who I work with now. And I was helping them in the solar industry, and they already had a company that was doing okay in roofing. So when I made that final, there's a lot of in-between points in all of this. But when I made that final shift, that was like the person that I worked with and like I've been like working under and, learning things through. Because their business is 4 hours from me, 3 hours from me. So I basically did the same down here using like their name and stuff like that. So kind of like almost like a franchise, I guess you could say. But yeah, and then like I said, even before I moved into roofing, not knowing that this would be helpful, but I actually, when I lived on the west side of the state in Grand Rapids, I worked for a roofing company. And that guy actually also like kind of helped me make the transition too. I reached back out to him when I realized I was going into roofing. So he gave me a few pointers too. That's my old boss, basically. So,
Okay.
so
Okay. For you now, like now that you started, what is an average day for you like?
well, it depends on the day, because so like what happened is when I came here, I had people that I was already working with in solar. So I didn't just come with me alone. I came with 2 people that are sales reps. Everybody's subcontracted out, and then 2 appointment setters. So like an average day would probably be like, right now it's heavily on the job management side, as odd as that is, even though I'm mainly in sales and marketing. So like today, for example, as we talked before this, waking up and, the crew's at a job and they need more of this material. So I have to send them money and send them the scope of work so they know what they're actually doing on the job. And then if a sales rep is in home and they call me and they tell me the words like, hey, I'm in home, then I instantly have to answer that and make sure like if they have any questions or need anything. So just really helping with sales reps and then helping like with the crews in the field and scheduling jobs, pulling permits, that kind of thing. The appointment setters kind of run in the background. They like just, their job's very simple. It's like one task, call the leads that come in, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. The reason I ask is because so many people nowadays are wondering, what is an entrepreneur that's already built a business? What are they doing now? And I want to try to provide information for young people that want to get into the field, but are not yet. And so you can't be asking Usain Bolt what kind of running shoes you buy, because that doesn't really matter. Like I should be asking Usain Bolt, how did you start running? I want to ask the world's strongest man, how did you start lifting? Like I have no place to ask an already professional athlete minor details about their life. Like I want to know how to start. That's what I want to provide. So I want to try to ask everyone that I interview, like, how did you start and what is the average and typical day like for you? Not just I'm going to a Ferrari dealership and I'm going to go pick up a Rolex. No. You got to start with the basics first,
Yeah.
So
it's overlooked a lot.
Yeah. I just want to keep it realistic and keep it humble, for anyone starting out.
Yeah.
So from your point now, how do you see yourself growing and what do you want to grow to?
So that's a good question, because I would say realistically, like, I'm not obsessed with the idea of being in the home improvement space. Like it's not like I live my whole life like I'm gonna be a roofer until I'm 70. So realistically, the goal is to either build it to like $4 to $10 million like a year. I would say is like pretty realistic to keep a lean team, and then either like sell to a bigger guy would be nice, or just have it so like systemized and like delegate it out that you don't really have to play a huge role. The problem with that train of thought is if you're not like growing in like business, if you don't think you're growing or want to grow, you're gonna like go backwards. So therefore, it's not going to be like some sort of thing where it's like, oh, I hit this number, I want to do this now, I want to sell, or I want to step back. Like you're going to have to grow, whether somebody else is put in your place to help it grow, or you're going to sell it to somebody else for them to grow it. Because if you just like, stop at that point, the business will just fall apart. So that's probably where I would say I want to get to, is like that $4 to $10 million range. And then if, the business is profitable and lean, hopefully you can get like a good multiple for the business and sell it. That's the way I would, look at it doing, because I have like passion projects I would like to start, like short-term Airbnbs and glamping and vacation rentals. Like I think that kind of stuff would be fun to get into. So I've like researched it a good amount. So
Okay. And you mentioned before that there was remind me if I'm wrong, there's a business that you were affiliated with that was a pretty big company, but it went under because of bad ethics, I should say.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that and like why they, as much as you can tell me, of course, but why they went under?
Yeah. So it was a giant solar company. If you're in the solar industry and you're in the Midwest, you either know them or worked for them at one point. I won't like say the name just because it doesn't really matter now, I guess, anymore, because they're out of business. But I started there when they first came to Michigan. They were in 14 states at one point. They came to Michigan, and actually I was dishwashing at the back of an Arabic restaurant for my job at the time, because I had that inflatable water park business and it was struggling. So I had to go get a job in the off season. And I saw an Indeed application while I was listening to an audiobook about sales. So like, let me see what sales jobs are in the area. It said make 6 figures, vehicle included, iPad included, come on by and see if you can do it. No degree required, none of that. And I'm thinking, oh, this has got to be a scam. But at the time I didn't have a car. I was just getting ready to buy one. I was like, well, if there's a car there, that's awesome, because I'll go from 0 to 2 cars. So I go, I stop in. And they call me for an interview, but it was from the Grand Rapids office. I wasn't living there. I was over here on the east side of the state. So I drove to their Manchester office, which I didn't know was only an installation office. And then from there, which a buddy of mine was an installer there, so that's kind of how I figured out like there was only installers there. They said, oh no, our sales office is another 50 minutes away in Sterling Heights. So I drove all the way over there, knocked on the door, and everybody was at lunch. So I ate lunch and waited for them. And when I got back, a guy was walking out, opened the door. I was like, hey, I'm here because I got an interview at the Grand Rapids office, but I live over here and I still want to work for you guys. And he was like, oh yeah, go in there, Courtney, whatever, we'll take care of you. Little did I know that was the owner of the, at the time, $100 to $150 million company that let me into the building. So long story short, got the job and ended up killing it. That was like my first like real sales job. I was already cold calling and stuff for my business before. But not like a salesman, I wasn't in sales. And long story short, got the job, worked for them. And that's where I learned a lot. Like I saw them go to almost a $500 million company at the time. So, it was no joke. Like I won a sales competition and got like a free cruise to the Bahamas. And I was like 20, dude. I wasn't even old enough to drink. And I was on a cruise. My managers are like having to buy me drinks and stuff. So that's like where I got my first, like, I would say taste of like real money. I was making like just around 6-figure mark and I was 20. So, but then I found out their ethics were screwed up, just being unethical and home, basically had me lying to customers. And I didn't even know because they like built it into our software. And then once I figured out, I took a leave of absence to go run my water park in the summertime. And then when I got back, my sales just plummeted because I like really started to realize like what was going on. And I think I sold like 2 deals a month for the last 2 to 3 months I was there because I couldn't do it. And then, they lost everything a few years after that, just basically because of lawsuits and issues that they say weren't their fault. But why is your company not around? So,
Yeah.
Shady.
That's rough.
It was, dude. I was loving my life. I was in college at the time, so I'm like, I'm working on the road. They would let me book my appointments. Oh, I want to go to Michigan State for the weekend. Send me appointments there. I'll wake up and tailgate, and then I'll go sell solar, make $1,000, $2,000 in a day, and then go back and sleep at my friend's house as a 20-year-old and drive. I loved my life. It was a blast. And I was making great money. But once I saw what was going on, the money can only be so good when I'm sitting in these people's houses. This isn't something I'm doing over a Zoom. I'm meeting their kids and their dogs and stuff. And then I'm realizing that what I'm selling them might not help them at all, if ever. So,
right. Yeah. I remember one instance where I just thought, oh my God, this poor woman. I mentioned briefly that I worked for an insulation company, and I went over to this lady's home to do some work in her attic. And so for those of you that don't know, the standard insulation is about a foot of insulation. So that's like a foot deep of the pink rolls of insulation, where the chewed up newspaper, which is called cellulose, that's code. Some places are 16. So it's just, about a foot to maybe 2 feet at the most. This woman's attic was stuffed full of insulation. She probably had at least 3 feet or more of insulation. I mean, a foot to 2 feet more of just wasted money, wasted material. That's not going to do anything. And I thought, some salesman is going home sleeping like a baby, even though he just sold this poor woman on how many hundreds or thousands of dollars worth of insulation that she doesn't need. Oh, yeah. I mean, of course, I couldn't say anything. It's like that's whoa. Some guy, some girl out there is doing this to people.
Yep.
Time and time again. And thought, how can you
see? That's all you see in that industry, dude. It's the shadiest thing I've ever seen in my life in solar. So it's crazy. I crawled up in that attic and I thought, this poor woman has no idea, because I mean she can't get up in the attic herself. I mean she was an elderly woman, so she has no idea that her attic is just a money pit, basically, from just some shady salesman. Thought, oh boy, this poor woman. Didn't even need it. He sold. She probably already had the foot to 2 foot, and then he just walked in and didn't want to lose the sale. Was like, oh wow, you're a little low. And then shuffled it around, took some pictures, went back downstairs, showed her. I was like, there you go. That's what they do.
And of course, that was the worst story, but that wasn't the only one.
Yeah, no.
The people that just they don't know, and the salesman just has dollar signs in their eyes, and oh, here's a big burlap sack with a money bag on it. It's like, shady.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no problem, man, at all. It was nice.
All right.
First ever.
Until next time.
All right, man. Until next time.